we're going to talk about your Top It Off project. So hold on.
Yes, and yours.
I got to cheer for you.
You got to cheer?
Okay.
Okay, I'm ready. I'm ready.
All right. Cookie Monster says that Hen and Chicks are the great big cookies at the top of the jar.
Oh, I love it. That is awesome.
I always have cheers. I just can't help.
I love it. I love it. Well, hello, everybody. I'm Heidi. This is Jamie, and we're at Hen Chicks Studio in Conrad, Iowa, and we're glad that you're on live with us today. Of course, we always love to know where you're watching from and what you're up to. So be sure to put comments in. I'm a little farther away from the computer today,
can't quite see, but that's okay.
But at the same time,
we still like to
I was gonna say we'll certainly watch them.
Okay, so I like to sing, but a little history of us. We're in Conrad, Iowa, which is in central Iowa, pretty much right in the middle of the state. It is winter here, so we have had some snow. But I usually sing, but today when we were talking about Top It Off, we had to talk about being the top of the cookie jar. So
I love it.
Yeah,
I love it.
Yeah.
It is fun.
Anyway, we might as well have some fun, right?
Oh, we love to have fun around here. We love to have fun. Okay, well, if you don't know what we're talking about when we say Top It Off Sew Along, let's give you just a little bit of a refresher. Yeah. So we started, this is our third week of working on a particular project, and we're calling it the Top It Off Sew Along because we're doing the Hat Hat Hooray pattern from Atkinson Designs. Terry Atkinson is a great designer, and I think people just smile when they see this particular one because who doesn't love a colorful hat? And sometimes those visions of those little kids, pulled out
with the
and
little side things on them too.
Oh,
and the little fluffies or the little pom-pom.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And so we decided, because we know a lot of our customers love that quilt, we have an Iowa State version here in the store that Jamie made. I have some hats in the one that I did, but that's a Frosty Fun is a slightly different version of the Hat Hat Hooray. It's a separate pattern. So anyway, it is, and people just love it. People react to it because it is a lot of fun to work with. So we thought that we would have fun. So in the week one, so the only thing it costs to participate is if you want to make the project and be eligible for prizes, then you have to purchase the pattern. And that's it. If you just choose to follow along in our videos, that's just fine. Yep. We don't have a problem with that. But the idea is that week one, Stacy and I talked about fabric selection, and many of you might recall that I am going a little nuts with my cherry fabric.
They probably picked that up by now.
I was going to say, do you think they've noticed that?
Yeah, maybe.
And then you were working with your Cuddle Scraps.
Cuddle Scraps was the inspiration with the batik background and flannel piecing. So totally different combination of not staying with one medium, so to speak.
That's right. And then week two last week, and if you're thinking, oh, I didn't see those videos, not a problem. All of this is on our website at henandchicksstudio.com/topitoff. No spaces in that. And you're going to find week one and week two video there already, and we'll put week three there later, kind of thing, so that you could go back and recap. But in week two, you and I talked about cutting. We brought out our favorite stripology rulers, talked about fussy cutting, and I just have to tell you that the stripology ruler, that, like, for example, and I'm gonna just go around here so I can actually maybe easier if I show this bottom one, then I don't have to hold up so much of the quilt. So I have all this Mary Engelbright fabric, and so because of course she has her favorite bowl of cherries. So like this particular block, you might think, wow, did she piece a curve? I don't like curved. That block is fussy cut. I just placed my ruler so that I could try to get the curve so it looked like it was a little more complicated than what it truly was. So that's fussy cutting. I did some more, I did it like on this one, I fussy cut the curve in the opposite direction. On this one, I fussy cut so that the border fabric was filling up one of the stripes. I mean, I really was trying to use my fabric.
Well, and we've seen it before. We've talked some about that. And again, that goes with your fabric selection and some other things as you get more using the same piece of fabric in a different fashion, or twisting it a little bit,
Right.
or turning it.
Right.
Different things
So
like that.
it's one of those things. I pulled out a whole stack of strawberry
Just look
of
at it.
cherry. See, it just makes you
I
smile because
know,
it's
but,
goofy,
okay, but this
right?
one, like, I didn't even realize there's this fruit one.
Oh
Like,
yeah,
this
there's
is
fruit.
called,
There's
like,
cherries in it.
fruit salad.
Oh yeah, fruit
Yummy,
salad,
like
absolutely.
pineapples.
And I have to tell you that
Okay, that's
even when
another
I was
one.
cutting this green fabric,
Mhm.
oh maybe it was this one of these green fabrics, was sewn to something else, and it had gotten stuck in my in my
Stash
stash,
somewhere
and
in
I'm
your
like,
unfinished stash or scraps.
well, I put it in with my cherry fabrics, but
mhm.
so I have no idea why I pieced those
you
two
had.
strips together, and I'm like, well, I'm not ripping it out.
Yeah.
So I literally just cut. I needed that narrow strip. I
So
just cut it.
off of it.
Yeah, because I thought at this point in the game,
Since you
that's
don't know what
better
you're
than
doing,
nothing,
yeah.
right?
Mhm.
Yeah. So anyway, I certainly had fun in the cutting process,
Mhm.
kind of thing. You talked a little bit last week about the stretch of your fabric and stuff because of like working with the cuddle.
Mhm.
Yes.
Yep. And the other thing that we talked about a little bit, and we'll touch just a bit on here, is some directional fabrics too.
Yes. And so now this week, well, we're going to talk about piecing.
Mhm.
And okay, so I do have to tell you that last week I promised you I would save
And she didn't.
one of the hats, but
She's
I
an
was on a
overachiever.
roll. I was on a roll and I couldn't stop. I had to keep going. I had to, keep going. So I did not end up saving the angled pieces. I was going to show you this particular block. This piece is a little bit wider, bigger than necessary, so it gives you a little bit of leeway room to work with. But anyway, it's not difficult. Do not be
And the other thing that we'll
stopped by
mention
the
too,
angles.
and we've mentioned it last week, but we'll mention it again as we're talking about piecing, is that the directions that are provided in Atkinson Design Patterns are very, very helpful, visual as well as explanation, because there's different ways to always look at things. But she does a great job with
Oh
it.
yeah, and for example, what if you think to yourself, oh my gosh, this quilt might be too difficult for me? It is set up for success for anybody at any level, and
Absolutely.
I'll just give you the example of the little balls on the top of the hat, right? Okay, they sometimes getting those little corners on frustrates people because they think, oh, I'm not perfect, kind of thing, and so. But guess what? You match it up to nothing. So you don't have to worry that if your angle was off slightly, or if you're maybe a little to the left, like this one, I could tell, well, I might be sort of centered. But you know what I mean? Like, I didn't have to worry about it because nothing was had to match up
So
exactly.
what Heidi's really referring to there, and an Atkinson pattern we talked about with, and the one behind me that you can see has the same thing where it's kind of a floating point, so that you're not having to match 2 points coming together. So there's some freedom in that. And while we're talking about that, and we know we're not piecing it and showing you sewing, but something I would challenge people to think about. When Heidi holds this up, do you really see if it's not perfectly centered?
Right. Or did I have any fabrics which you think might be upside down? And I'm gonna recap a little conversation I had yesterday. So the last 2 days, I did get to spend the 2 days sewing at our Rule the Roost retreat, which is a public retreat where you can come and sew. And again, I was on a roll. And one of the gals that was there, we were having quite a discussion because she was working on a project that she thought, it was, if you have directional fabric, it does get very specific as to how you have to cut so that when you piece, your directional fabric goes back and forth. I was 6 feet from her, and I even said, hey, bring that on over here. I couldn't tell that it was directional fabric. So we started having a discussion about, she had pieced a couple blocks, and she felt like she was had one of the directional pieces that she felt was directional upside down. She'd flopped 2 different pieces, and she was like two blocks into, I think she has to do like 30 some blocks, and it was taking her a long time. So we had the discussion about at what point do you stop worrying and just start sewing? And I was saying to them, like in the last 2 days, sewing was my therapy. is this the most perfect piece I have ever pieced?
No, but it sure makes you smile.
It
you
does.
Sent pictures from upstairs to downstairs to me as she was going.
And it truly was like a therapy sewing thing of like, I need to sew and this is fun to do. But we had that discussion and I'm like, who is the quilt for? It's for her young son. Are you going to wash it and dry it? Yes, and probably throw up on it, right? And is it the quilt that you're going to want to be the masterpiece that you die on and that you're never going to make him another quilt? And the answer was no. So I said, at some point, where do you stop being again, it's her quilt, and we had this discussion. She has to decide what she's doing. But at some point, you know what? I learned a lot on this block. I'm going to keep going.
Yeah.
And you made a very good point when I was telling you this, that when you pull a quilt over your lap, you're not necessarily going, wait a minute, do I have the top of the quilt or the bottom of the quilt? And you look at a quilt from different directions, that it may feel upside down
on one case, but
it might be correct on another.
Yeah.
So, so many different things about that.
And that kind of goes into your cutting and to your piecing. And another great example, this is what I did, which I would consider, and as you can see, I am not an overachiever on this one. I mean, oftentimes I can, but this one I'm not, because well, I did finish, and you'll have to watch that for
you finished
nice
the different. Yeah, we'll show that next week. We've already got new quilts coming back for next Wednesday.
But this would be what I would consider directional fabric. I don't know if you can see the zigzags on that, right? But when I sewed this block on, and I did it consciously because I thought it'd look fun. If I wanted those zigzags to run the same direction, I needed to turn my square 90 degrees. So those are things to consider, because if I would have turned my block 90 degrees, then they all would have ran.
And some of it is personal preference. And at the end of the day, you have to live with the quilt that you want. I'm going to double check here and see if there's any.
So I want to go back to talking just a little bit about when you are piecing, and like when the palms, what she's talking about is that we have these four corners that make into the four corners of the top of the hat, or the pom-pom of the hat. This one I happen to use the cuddle, so I have to kind of, there's a little bit of stretch to it, so I needed to think about which way the stretch was when I sewed it together. But one of the things that is going to help you a lot when you're piecing, and you've heard us talk about this before, is your pressing. Pressing, especially when you are opening up your angles, whether it's on the back, on this bottom piece, which I thought I had one, but I don't know where it's at, or on this top. When I'm putting those triangles back, a nice firm press, whether you're at there, making sure that I get the pressing.
So correct. Do you like to, like I always say, before I press it open, I set the seam with steam. Then I use the tip of the iron to open it up and to heat it. And it's not hot at the moment, so we're not going to burn each other. Don't worry. When we
discussed about having it hot.
Yes, but that setting the seam is important. You want to have that as flat as you possibly can as you open it up.
Right. So when you're piecing it, and again with this quilt, the beauty of this particular pattern, oftentimes we talk about nesting the seams together when you're lining them up to get the seams straight. On this particular pattern, we don't have that challenge.
Right. And that's, again, but Terry in her instructions and all the Atkinson Design patterns, I think she does a great job of telling you which way to press. Arrows. And I think that's really good. But you're right. So many times it did not matter which way I was going. So that's super important.
Another thing I would recommend, so pressing, and I don't know, like here's a little strip, Heidi, that we can maybe look at, and you want to make sure you get that, especially when you're working with this, because this is a 1-inch piece, so it ends up being half an inch. If I don't have a good press on it, it could become even a smaller. It could mess with my sizing just a bit.
Absolutely, it could.
The other thing I would recommend, now Heidi's looking to see what comments and stuff we have, but I would definitely recommend, when you are piecing, having a good piecing pin.
Oh, absolutely.
And I could run back. I didn't think to grab them, but your pins make a difference.
Patchwork fine pins are my favorite because they're a silk pin and they're thin and they're a little bit more pliable, but I can get it in. And even yesterday when I was pinning, piecing these things and putting stuff together, I still was pinning at least the start and stop, so that my blocks ended up more true right away.
Yeah.
That I wasn't going to have to trim a lot.
But so a thicker shaft, or oftentimes a lot of sewing, maybe beginning sewers have the flower head pins. They certainly have a purpose and a place, but when you are piecing your quilt top, I would highly recommend staying away from those if you can. If you're pinning stuff to hold it together or different things, that's one thing. But when you're matching your seams or getting those piecing blocks together,
absolutely,
to use that.
Absolutely. And again, in a couple of the comments I'm hearing, and hello to all of our friends, Casey and Jan, and everybody that's watching, Lois. I can't remember everybody's names because that was 3 minutes ago, and I can't see all the way over there. But I've told this story many times. When I first started at Meredith Corporation, I had the opportunity to buy an antique quilt that had been featured in a Better Homes and Gardens book, right? Quilt book. And it was a beautiful book. It was like a coffee table style book. And I thought, oh, this quilt, it's gorgeous. And at first glance, it was yellow and white pinwheels, and it was stunning, just stunning. Well, let me tell you, over the years, I have chuckled so much because there was no match of points. There were points that were lopped off here and lopped off there. And I think that's like the perfect example of it was a cherished heirloom and it wasn't perfect. And somebody mentioned, the whole galloping horse. And it's one of those things. I mean, I don't think my piecing is perfect, but when you look at from this distance, I mean, you're seeing the fun happy hats. Yeah. They're fun happy hats. And that's what my goal was to use my cherry fabric. And now when I look at it, I see my cherry pie and I see my, my Mary Englebright fabrics and that kind of thing, just because it's fun.
And then, Heidi, let's talk a little bit, because in this one you had a long scarf.
Yes.
So the pieces of the scarf.
So I have my red scarf and my green scarf.
Well,
there you go.
Parts of them.
Yeah.
But again, on this, I would say, as you're piecing this together, would you think that your pressing became more important because the length of this particular piece?
Absolutely. And then pinning becomes important because, again, if my sewing was off slightly, then I want to be able to make sure that, like, even when I was
I feel
measuring,
like I could wear this, Heidi.
Yes, you could. I think you could. Even when I was measuring this sashing piece in here, I measured the length of my each row, and then I cut those strips so that I knew that they were exact.
So let's talk about that. Okay, that's totally different off the topic, because we know sashing happens a lot, right? We don't have one back behind us that has it. Do you sew, just take your width of fabric and say it's a 54-inch wide quilt. You've sewn a couple pieces together. Do you start sewing at one end and go to the other end and then trim your sashing?
Yep.
Or do you measure your quilt and cut your sashing to the appropriateness or the measurement of it?
I've done it both ways over the years, and I can tell you I usually end up with better success if I cut it to the exact measurement.
So you would, if it was a 54-inch quilt, you would cut it to the 54-inch.
That's correct.
So, I mean, that's a tip for somebody, I think. I've done it both ways too. So.
Yeah, and I think about, I'm gonna use the example of even a log cabin block. If everybody knows a log cabin block, you start with a block in the center, and then you add a strip, and you add a strip.
Work your way out.
And I did not cut any of my strips to the right length. I added on, and then I said, okay. My block, the first couple blocks I did were so wonky that I'm like, what am I doing wrong? Because I'm thinking, I'm trimming it. I'm not trimming it accurately. So at that point, I happened to use a specific log cabin ruler from Marty Michelle that we had at the time. And I used that, and I cut all of my strips exactly the right length to begin with. My blocks were perfect. They went together perfectly.
And Heidi, why do you think that is? And I'm asking these questions not
because somebody has the question. Somebody has has that same question.
Because we've talked about, for instance, when we talked about me piecing with different fabrics. So batik has less of a stretch to it. When you cut a batik, it's going to be pretty true to it's going to stay pretty true with very little stretch.
Yes.
A typical, we'll say cotton, has a little bit of give.
And more than you think.
Yeah.
I think there's
and some more than others.
Some more than others. And I think what it does is it just takes the guesswork out. If I measured this piece and it was supposed to be 4.5 inches, I don't know what that is, 5 inches. If it was supposed to be 5 inches and I'm off,
let's say 1/4 of an inch because
correct. Then I can either work at gathering it in, or I can stretch it out so that it's all the correct size.
And your pinning becomes important.
That's right
too.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I hope that helps somebody understanding that, because sashing happens a lot in our fringe quilts that we've done. It's happened. We have currently one hanging up with the fringe. We'll watch next week for that, some more of that. But if you are working with, and on this one, it does the same thing with that. Even though it's not a different colored sashing, it is still one long
piece
that goes across the width of the quilt.
And when along that lines, I got into trouble with my last stash buster.
With your last sew along.
Yes, which was the what was it called?
Square dance.
And we still can't quite figure out what happened. But it had something to do with the sashing strips, and I cut the sashing strips lengthwise, parallel, which is supposed to be less stretch
and stress.
Absolutely. And somehow, however I was sewing it, my pieced rows were ending up big time different. Yet when it all got ripped apart and sewn back together, those rows ended up being the same size.
Yeah.
It was crazy.
Yeah.
But it did have something to do, and it was one of those where I was just cutting and sewing, and I wasn't measuring, I wasn't taking. And you can get into a little trouble that way.
Yeah. So just an awareness of this.
Yes.
Heidi, was there any other thing that we were talking about?
I'm going to go over there and look and see if anybody has any questions.
Yep.
Why don't you explain what that is? The mat.
Okay.
The wool mat.
Yeah.
And how that works with ironing. So if somebody has an idea.
So even on when we're going to talk about pressing, how important pressing is. And so I had that piece here, a couple of them where I've pressed it and I made sure the seams are pressed nicely. So when I pin it together, I can sew. And here would be an example, Heidi, where I'm not perfectly perfect on one of my triangles right there. Maybe you can see it peeking out over the top just a tiny bit. I'm going to just be able to make that straight because I have this is nice, the other one's straight. Yep. And I'll pin them together and voila, they'll be done.
Yep.
But talking about that pressing, love the wool mat because essentially what it does when you're using it, it collects the heat as well.
So you're sandwiching your block between the iron and your warm wool mat.
Yep. And even on my ironing board at home, I have a wool mat on top of my ironing board for when I'm piecing.
Yep. And one of the reasons why we didn't turn the iron on, just so you know, in case you have an iron, is that a mat like this would still take in the heat and it would warp because it's going right through and it would warp. And so we don't want our mat to get warped. So that's why we chose not to turn the iron on right here with it, because otherwise you have to move everything. And all that stuff.
Yeah. So,
okay, so
was there any questions with it?
No, I think we're doing okay.
Awesome. I guess what would be if somebody is piecing this together and sewing, what would be your biggest piece of advice for them?
Well,
top advice, whatever you want to call it.
Yes, I say when it comes to piecing, I'm going to say pinning with the silk pins is my favorite. And then the next thing would be to press really well so that and excuse me, I'm going to, I do not like to wait and press all at the end. I like to press as I go so that I keep things nice and flat. And
you got to do that. And I would agree with Heidi on that too. Pressing as you go, and even when you're sewing like the strips together, instead of trying to sew the next strip with that tiny little piece, to go ahead and press the previous one open, and then because you have a flatter surface as to what it can do to get it on there. What I think I would recommend, again, the pressing and the piecing, but making sure that you have a true 1/4 inch is also very important. And there's different tools. We have one, perfect piecing seam guide, can't think what it's called, the perfect piecing, or you can measure. So you can stitch along, just stitch one of your edges, then actually measure on a scrap piece of fabric together, measure what you think is a 1/4 inch, and then go back and measure, is it actually a 1/4 inch? What is that perfect seam
guide from
Perkins Dry Goods.
Perkins Dry Goods.
Yeah, and we do
Yes.
have that available. But that's probably how you will be the most accurate. Of course, cutting is important, but making sure
Yeah.
on your sewing machine that you have a consistent 1/4 inch seam.
Since I was gagging on my whatever that was, did you mention that there is actually a video about
I
perfect
did
quarter
not
inch
get
seam
to that
allowances?
one. Yeah.
So they're on our website under the inspiration tab. You'll find the Hen House Happy Hour videos, and there's a lot of videos there. They're really good. On the 1/4 inch one, it's from Celine Perkins at Perkins Dry Goods. Free, great ones to watch.
Always tips, and
Yep.
we love those. So next week we will be back, and as you can see, I have a lot of work to do before
Yeah.
next week,
So
which I'm not quite certain how I'm going to get that done, but we'll see how far
that's
I get.
right. So next Thursday we're going to talk about finishing, and we'll see where I'm at too, because I have a lot of volleyball and basketball in between now and then. That was the other push for me to sew. And then the final date, I believe it's all on the website at henandchickstudio.com/topitoff. But I think it's February 7th.
Somewhere it's
And then
February.
right, and then on the 14th we're going to have a little award. So I know a couple people have already uploaded their quilts, and we love that.
Yes.
So
And thank you for sharing on our Facebook creative community too, Hen Chicks creative community.
Oh,
It
yeah.
is so much fun to see not only this project but other
all the
projects
projects
that
they're
you're
working on. That's
Yeah.
right. Okay, are we
Right.
ready?
Are you ready to top it off?
I think we're ready to top it off. So everybody have a great day, and until the next time we see you, be creative.
Bye.